And we have some new introductions to make. We have some new introductions to make tonight, which I'm happy to announce. Yeah, I'd like to call the meeting to order. My name is Joel Hicks. I'm the chair of the Carlisle Climate Action Commission, and this is our third executive committee session. We have a couple of things lined up for tonight. I did get a very late notice from our UGI rep, who was with us last month, Tony Reimer, who is not going to be able to make it this evening, and we will reschedule UGI's presentation for February, and he really wanted me to convey his apologies at the last minute cancellation. So Tony, who we met last month, will be joining us again in February. I think now that I think everybody's joined in, we did have one agenda item. I would like to go ahead and make a motion to approve last month's meeting minutes. Can I get somebody to approve that motion?
Second.
Then we had a second from our Dr. Underwood to approve the meeting minutes from December. Any discussion needed? Joyce always does a great job on these, and I appreciate all the effort she does to make sure we capture our work correctly. I don't see any objections. Make a motion that we approve the minutes from December.
Joel, I think you had a motion and a second.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, we'll go ahead and all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Seeing it is approved. We'll go ahead and we need to do some updates on our membership status. We have some new folks joining us for the first time from PPL, and we were really heartened and thankful that they're able to join us. I know it will probably be useful for everybody to sort of reintroduce themselves as we continue to get new members. So I know we have Jim Rowland from PPL. Is that correct? Did I get your name right?
Roland. Close
Roland.
enough.
All right, thanks. Yeah, and we also have Barbara Sexton from PPL.
Good evening. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. We also have, I'm happy to say, Tom Horton from the Carlisle Area School District is joining us.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, sort of for everyone's, well, actually, am I able to share my screen, Stephanie, if I need to?
Do you have if you have the option, the little green arrow to share your screen? It should be at the bottom.
Okay,
on the
it looks like I can. So I think it might be helpful for everybody to kind of see how we're organized a bit. Is everybody able to see the screen?
You got it.
Yes.
Okay. This will sort of help for those who are joining for the first time or might not be as familiar with how we're organized. The commission is set up along 4 teams, each with team leaders, who I'm happy to say are all here tonight. So we have a chair who's myself. We have a representative from council, who is the Deputy Mayor Sean Schultz, who's representing. I'm also coincidentally on council, but I'm not primarily here in that capacity. We have a borough manager rep, Susan Armstrong, who is representing the borough, is here, and there's also Owen Snyder, who's the deputy borough manager, who also joins us on the executive committee occasionally, but is also part of one of the teams. I'm happy to also introduce, I think the last new face for tonight is Tamala Trussell. And she has just, she was just, is it Trussell or Trussell? I should have asked this many days ago.
It's Trussell.
Trussell, okay, so Tamala Trussell is just got approved this week, and we were really encouraged and lucky to get her to be on another member as our resident at large. And then the balance of our commission, these are the voting members of our commission, come from the 4 team leads, the zoning, projects and estimates team, community engagement team, and the pathways and analytics team. I'll let everybody introduce themselves, but I thought it was useful to sort of get everyone aligned with the way we're structured. And so in addition to that, we have stakeholders who I consider part of the executive committee, but are not voting members. And those are some of the folks joining us tonight. You know, we have reached out to different stakeholders, and they're gradually joining us. We've gotten positive responses from PPL and UGI, a couple of whom are with us tonight. We have Tom Horton from the Carlisle Area School Board. And we continue to reach out to other partners in the community to be part of this. I think some of the ability for people to join have been competing with other needs and requirements, but I do expect our group to sort of grow gradually as we move on. So with that, in no particular, it'll be particularly in the order I have you on the screen. I'd love everyone to introduce us in. I see Stephanie there, our Director of Operations, our executive producer here. You want to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name's Stephanie, and I'm the Public Information Coordinator for the borough. So that means I do the website, social media, all that kind of good stuff.
Thanks, and then I see Tom, you're next.
Yep, and I am the Director of Facilities for the Carlisle Area Schools. This is my 16th year with the district, so pretty much anything that moves in the district, I'm involved in one way or the other. So glad to be part of this group.
Thanks, Tom. Tom's work and effort is embedded in a lot of the data and information a lot of you, especially Tony, has been working with. So he was a critical part of our greenhouse gas inventory collection process, and we're really thrilled that he can continue to be representing the school district with us here. And they've done some really groundbreaking and important work that I'm sure they'll continue to move forward. Joyce Stone, I see you there.
Hello. Hi, my name is Joyce, and I'm the borough secretary and the minute taker for these meetings.
Yeah, thanks, Joyce. Jim Rowland.
Hi, Jim Rowland, regulatory policy manager for PPL Electric.
Great. Welcome. Barbara Sexton. Hi.
Hi, yes, and I'm Government Relations Manager for PPL Electric. Happy to be here.
Great. Great to have you. Thank you. Tamala.
Yes, I'm a 24-year Carlisle resident and educator and environmental activist.
All right. Great to have you on board, and congratulations on becoming part of our executive committee. Susan.
Good evening. I'm Susan Armstrong. I'm the Carlisle Borough Manager. Thank you.
Hi, Susan. And then we have Larry Bird's agent, Owen Snyder, joining us.
Good evening, Owen Snyder. I'm the Assistant Borough Manager, and I'm currently helping on the Pathways and Analytics team.
Evening, Owen. Glad you could join us. And Sarah Markowitz. Good evening.
Hi, good evening. My name is Sarah Markowitz. I am the team lead for the community engagement team.
All right. And Tony Underwood.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here, all the new faces. We're happy to have you here. Hope to be able to pick your brains over the next several months. I am Tony Underwood. I am leading the Pathway and Analytics team. In my day job, I'm an associate professor of economics at Dickinson College.
Thanks, Tony. And Deputy Mayor Schultz.
I'm Sean Schultz. I've been a member of council for about 12 years now, but that doesn't pay the bills. So I'm an attorney and a municipal solicitor. So from time to time, although Carla knows the MPC and zoning inside and out, from time to time I'll hop in and help out primarily on zoning. And then from time to time these days, I'm a teacher downstairs in my home and teaching math and writing.
Yeah. Wow. Thanks, Sean. Carla, good evening.
Good evening. Managed to unmute myself. I'm Carla Farrell. I am the person doing the zoning. As Sean said, I'm a landscape architect and a certified planner in Pennsylvania.
Good to see you, Carla. And last but not least, Mohammed.
Oh, hey there. Mohammed Badisi. I'm a law professor here at Dickinson Law, focusing in energy regulation.
Mohammed, it's a shame. I'm having trouble hearing you. I can barely hear.
Wow. Well, let me try and fix that. I apologize.
Give
me 1 second here, and let me see if I can figure out. You know, I don't know what it is, man.
Yeah, a little quiet there.
Am I faint? Is that what it is?
Yeah, we can hear you, but it's like your mic volume's turned down.
Oh man. Well, I will yell at the top of my lungs and just say good evening.
well, yeah. Hopefully we'll get that worked out. So Mohammed is the head of our projects and estimates team, and also a professor at Dickinson Law. So I feel like it's been a year since we met last. So some Happy New Year to everybody. Yeah, and a lot of activity has sort of captured our attention in the last few weeks. But I think from a vantage point of what we're focused on in this commission, I think it's probably safe to say there's going to be the potential for a lot of movement in the energy sector coming from the federal and the state governments, with at least the rhetoric and the promises that the incoming administration has stated as their goals and objectives and priorities. I think a lot of that work is going to flow down and will likely need to be reflected in the balance of our work for the next 9 months or so. Thank you everyone for introducing yourselves. I guess without further ado, if Jim or Barbara are prepared, we would love to just sit back and listen to all the work that PPL is doing. And yeah, we may, I'm sure some of us will have some questions, but one of the objectives I'd like to try to start this evening is to get your participation optimized so that our team leads can work with you all to just get a better understanding of what your priorities and goals are as we move forward. I don't want to overemphasize the importance of our relationship with PPL, but without being too, I guess, too bold, we're not going to reach our goals without close work with our utilities, and I would say particularly with PPL. And as most of the people on the commission understand, it is my, deep desire to work closely with our utility partners, and I feel confident that we can move forward and obtain our objectives in a completely win-win sort of situation. Part of that just understands what your priorities and challenges as a company are, and we want to make sure that PPL understands that Carlisle is a community that's ready to move forward. And I think a lot of us realize that it's tough to sort of, sometimes it's a bit of a catch-22 to be a utility provider, because sometimes you want to do some things that are sort of forward-leaning and innovative, but you need data for the PUCs to sort of give you the go-ahead to do. And sometimes it's tough to find communities that are willing to sort of do sort of those innovative things. And one of the things we really want to signal as part of this commission to our utility providers is we're a community that's ready to be that test bed of innovation, because we realize, it goes beyond Carlisle. We're never going to move our objectives forward unless we have communities that are willing to work together with our utility providers. And yeah, sort of with that backdrop, I don't know if Barbara or Jim.
Yeah, thank you. We're happy to partner with you and share with you today some of our sustainable goals. But having said that, I have some roots in Carlisle in that I worked for the Cumberland County Conservation District for 5 years.
Oh, very
I was
good.
the first staff and kind of got that place organized and up and running before I went to work at DEP. So yeah, I know Carlisle well.
That's great. Yeah, we still have a lot of people, some of them on this call, who are part of that. So yeah.
Great. So I've shared my screen. Is everyone able to see it? See my PowerPoint? No?
Sometimes there's a little delay.
Can I use this moment to test and see if my mic's working any better? Awesome.
Can you see it now?
Yeah.
There you
Okay.
go.
All right. There we go. Great. So happy to be here. Jim and I will just briefly run through some of our initiatives. And just to start out with, we do have our corporation is very much focused on our sustainability commitments. And one of those relates to advancing a clean energy future. So these outline some of our goals, which include reducing our CO2 emissions by 80% from our 2010 levels by 2050, with an additional mid-level step in there of 70% reduction by 2040. Since deregulation, I'll remind you that PPL does not operate generation facilities. We are an EDC. We only deliver the electricity. So now that we are not a generator, so our environmental focus in Pennsylvania is really to decarbonize our non-generation operations. So how do we do that? We've been working on it through our fleet. PPL has a large fleet with serving over 1.4 million customers in 29 counties. We have a large fleet. So we have worked to acquire some electric lift buckets and replacing some of our other vehicles using Chevy Volts. So on the EV side, that's one of our focuses. And the other is actually reducing some greenhouse gases from our substations by replacing some of our older breakers with new breakers that have fewer emissions from the sulfur hexafluorides. I believe all of you are familiar with the AEPS rules in Pennsylvania that requires 18% of our electricity distributed, that it has to come from alternative energy sources by 2021. We all know that deadline is plateauing this year. I would anticipate from the Pennsylvania legislature or from the governor some additional milestones on changing some of those AEPS targets. On the environmental stewardship side, we're very focused on some of our programs, including appliance recycling, wood pole recycling, and our Community Roots program, where we partner with local environmental organizations and provide free trees to mostly fourth grade students in various school districts in our service territory. But as you mentioned, the energy landscape is certainly changing, and we're improving our distribution system for a distributed energy resources enabled smart grid future. We do anticipate changes with the new administration in Washington. You mentioned the energy side, but I do believe there will be climate impacts, not just from the energy side, but infrastructure in a broader sense, that being transportation or wastewater treatment. That's all, I think, going to all help us on our climate objectives. So working to prepare for tomorrow's energy needs. We have DER integration, that's distributed energy resources management. I'm going to let Jim speak a little to this in a minute, but we are working with the existing grid to make sure it's not just safe, reliable, and affordable, but we want to make sure that we can have two-way energy supply for alternative energy systems. We do have low-income energy programs. RAP is one of those. That's a winter relief assistance program for customers living on a limited income. And we have home energy reports available that are a result of a home energy audit. We work with contractors. That's available not just to homeowners, but also to renters. And then we offer a similar program for businesses on rebates and efficiency projects, as well as audits. Again, the goal there is energy efficiency. So what is our role in Carlisle's development of a CAP? We can certainly partner with you, assist you in any way you'll have to let us know. We'll have a discussion about that, but we certainly could assist you in any energy efficiency needs you have for any of the borough's buildings, parking facilities, lighting, any coordination on EV charging stations you may plan. We certainly like to work in advance on all EV charging stations for safety and reliability reasons. And again, we're focused on the appliance recycling program, Community Roots program, and I'll leave this open for any issues. But Jim, could you speak briefly on inverter and DER petition? I think that might be of interest to this group.
Sure. So just recently, well, about a year ago or so, we had filed a petition with the State Commission to be basically approved to create these standards. And the standards we want to implement are at the inverter level, which is, for lack of a better understanding, it's basically attached, in most cases in Pennsylvania, it's to solar, although there's a number of different resources that use the inverters. And what we're trying to do with it, and we just got approval for, is basically to set a standard so that when new resources come on the grid, mostly we're talking about customer-owned ones. So they could be businesses, they could be residential customers. When they're trying to put new solar panels on, or biofuels or other sorts of alternative resources on the grid, it allows us to create a base model. And by this, it allows us to add more onto the grid, as opposed to each and every individual customer basically running their own program their own way. So sometimes they're running very efficient, sometimes they're not running very efficient, sometimes they're working against each other. This helps create a uniform standard across the base so that they're all working in concert with each other. They're all running at optimum levels. They're all running at optimum levels with the grid. So it doesn't cause trip offs, so that they're not working, and thus they're not producing the power they're supposed to. But it also links to the earlier slide that Barb had shown with our DERM system, Distributed Energy Resource Management System. And basically it takes all of this information that now we're getting from these inverters and lets our operations know what's going on the kind of micro level. So now we know when they're operating, we can alter the grid so that it works really perfectly and in tandem with the resources, again, so they're working right and well, and they're always up. Or if there's an outage, there's a power outage, in many cases, the resources aren't working. Well, when we restore power, we can then work with the customers almost instantly to bring them back online, and slowly, so that they ramp up with the grid, and then they're working optimally again. So it's both when they go down, but also when they come back up.
Hey, Jim, can I stop you there for just a second? This is really, I want to echo what you and Barbara are talking about for the rest of the group, because this is kind of new stuff that's coming down. So it sounds like you're talking a lot about the FERC 2222 order, which is going to allow distributed energy resources to be put on wholesale markets and to have the same competitive rates that other traditional types of energy sources have. So just so folks know, the recent FERC order is a big deal. It's a really big deal. I would say maybe even more so in deregulated states like Pennsylvania that are in a wholesale market like PJM. So Jim, correct me if I'm wrong. It sounds like a lot of the technology you're trying to put in our service area is trying to kind of create a standard by which a lot of these distributed energy resources can then be aggregated to then, potentially be, I don't know, even, for those who want to go on the wholesale market, they can do so, but PPL is sort of trying to be the technology orchestrator, if you will, for all these new types of resources coming in. Did I capture that correctly?
In part. So when we implemented our petition with the commission, we didn't have FERC 2222 in mind. It was really just to have them work in tandem with the grid, not against the grid. It just now so happens when that order came out, it actually could give us as a utility, depending on how the order is implemented on kind of the regional and the state level, give us that opportunity to help aggregate, or could just give aggregators themselves, whomever they be, other businesses and other curtailment providers, the ability to then use the same sort of information and aggregate customers together and do the same thing in the wholesale market.
Okay, I think I understand. Well, let me go ahead and let you finish. I wanted to kind of freeze it a bit there on the distributed energy side, since it's such a dynamic, rapidly changing thing for you all, and potentially for the behind the meter types of service, demand response sort of services that we're realizing more and more of the flexibility those can have in stabilizing the grid, but also to kind of provide precision sort of generation when needed. So go ahead and finish. I have a couple other things, and I'm sure some of the other team leads do, but I wanted to freeze there a bit, but please continue.
Sure. So the only other thing that I basically dovetail off you is all of this, what we're doing now, the things that you heard just from Barb, as well as these new orders coming out. There's a lot that's been in place for many years, meaning solar's been around for quite some time. It's growing significantly in popularity, but it's been around for decades. Wind power has been along for as long, if not longer. Electric vehicles, the same. Battery storage is growing. They've been around for a while, but they're also growing in popularity, and we're growing in our own understanding of them. So that's the other thing, to harken back to what you've started with innovation. We're also learning as much as we're trying to be a leader. And so it's great to hear that you're also trying to do the same thing. You're learning along with everybody else, but you're trying to be innovative and lead in that same sort of manner. So we're with you in many ways. We have great experts in the company. I'm not going to sit here and say I know everything. I try to know as much as I can, but I rely a lot on my engineers and managers in different groups that have this experience. So I'm hopefully going to be able to leverage that as well. If there's questions I can't answer myself, then I'll definitely take it back to them, and I'll get you the answer I can to help you drive forward.
That's great, Jim. I don't think there's anything more we could ask for. I appreciate that. I have was that, did you have anything else, Barbara, you wanted to present, or I didn't know if...
No, just if you had any questions, we're happy to partner and, be a resource for you. So.
Oh, great. Maybe it's one of the privileges of being chair, but I'm going to ask the first questions because I have like 10 of them, but I'm not going to ask all 10. I'm only going to pick like the top 2, but so I do want the team to realize, and it can, the way energy services are provisioned and provided is a crazy array across different states. They're all different. It's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. So just understand that. In Pennsylvania, we have a kind of a unique, kind of unique is actually, doesn't make sense. There are some other states that have similar models where we're both deregulated and we're part of a wholesale market. Virginia, for instance, is still a regulated state, but they're also in a wholesale market. And then there are places that are neither deregulated or in wholesale markets. But that's to say, it's important to realize for the folks on the committee that PPL doesn't own generation. As being part of a deregulated state, it's separated the vertical integration of utility companies to be to separate distribution and transmission from generation. So everybody who doesn't know needs to kind of get out of their head that PPL has much to do with putting or controlling the generators that we purchase from. I will say, and one of my big questions is, PPL does serve as our sort of retail interaction between transmission, distribution, as well as the wholesale generators. And so, it's a one-stop shop. Everybody who buys electricity goes through PPL, even though PPL sort of works among a lot of different users. But PPL does select a default sort of option in terms of all the types of generation that are out there. They sort of pick a mix of that and provide a competitive rate as a default rate for Carlisle residents and commercial entities and industry. I am a behavioral economist, works in the public policy area, and one thing I really do realizes the importance of default options. Default options there's a lot of research out there that even with low barriers to changing options, people don't like to go away from the default option. Can you talk a bit to the group about how PPL sort of goes through the process of determining what is the default package that they sort of provide the typical resident who doesn't want to mess around with changing their wholesale provider?
Jim, I'll let you handle that one.
Sure. So yeah, at least came to the right place because my team manages that. We actually conduct the auction. So so great question. And interestingly enough, we just had also commission approval of our latest default service plan, which is what we call it, their default service 5 plan. So that's how many iterations we're in this almost 13 years now with plans. In short, there are a set of rules, principles that are regulation that we have to obtain in order to get review and approval by the commission. Big ones are like least cost over time. So it's a very nebulous sort of requirement, but it's something that the commission looks to say, are you going out for various products and services first before anything else, that it's likely to be a least cost product over the duration of the time that you're trying to purchase it for, or that you're going to set a rate. So we normally set plans for 4-year periods. Not that the rate is set for 4 years, but it's a duration of time that we're going to go buy power for over 4 years. And that's really what they're looking at, is what's the history look like? How have you performed in the past? And what's your plan look like for the future? And does it seem to obtain that? Are you making a good argument for it?
And just to clarify, when you talk about costs, I assume least cost really kind of focuses on just strictly capital and fuel costs, and not any other sort of, potentially carbon related costs, or is it pretty much strictly fuel and capital?
Right. And even when it gets to cost, even that's somewhat nebulous in that it's electricity rate price. So it's what's the cost of electricity in the market, almost ignoring fuel entirely. It's saying what's the best, lowest possible cost you can get for customers. Again, to your point is default. If customers don't shop, we're trying to get the best possible rate for you almost regardless of what the source is.
Okay.
Now that's not to say source isn't taken in consideration, because that's one of the other marks that we have here. So there's 2 other things that I put forward. One is it gets into a little bit of the economic mix of it. It's contract type. So we have to have a mix of contracts so that, one, we're not going out to the market all at one point in time, buying power that could be extremely high, and then customers will saddle with it. So we have short, long-term, and spot market contracts that we have to mix. And so that's one of them. And then the last is there's a series of regs. So Barb touched on it early, which is AEPS, our state AEPS. We have a regulatory obligation as part of this that we will acquire power from renewables. Now we prove that to the state through renewable credits. So basically what we do in this, again, to get the best cost, is we don't own the power plants. So I'm going to have to rely on the parties that do to supply this, and that means getting me those credits. So what we have contractually obligated to them is to go purchase those and to give it to us on an annual basis to meet our requirements 1 for 1, so that we will always meet that obligation. If we don't, we have backup provisions to kind of go out and do that. So that has been something that we've always done. We've always met our obligation. And in this current plan, we're actually dividing some of these things up, and we're going to separately go out for renewable credits, not kind of bundle them together with power. So what we're now doing, and this is the first time we're ever doing it, is going out just for renewable credits for all of our customer products. So this is going to make sure that this money is getting right to those that have those credits. 90% of the time, it's either the owner of the renewable facilities, or it's like a third party that might aggregate a bunch of little ones up together, kind of get those credits, and then can sell them out to the community that needs them. So that's how we're doing it this time through. And it's basically products per customer group, and we have 3. So it's residential, small business, and large business.
That's really, thank you for being so descriptive. That was, I think I followed that pretty well. I did sort of, I'm curious to know whether, you know, in your mix of generation sources, you know, if an area like Carlisle, for instance, if we just overnight every resident went on PA power switch and switched to a particular renewable generation source, would those decisions affect your default service, your LCOT? I mean, to what extent do people's choice in selecting their wholesale provider actually impact your array of your bundle of default options? I got to imagine there's a bit of a relationship there.
Interestingly, there's not too much. The only big difference is that I would buy less renewable credits. For the power, we call it load following. So the less power you use, the less we purchase dynamically, and the more you use, the more we purchase. So we really put the risk on the supplier, not on the customer. And we say, supplier, you're going to have to model the grid, you're going to have to model customers, you're going to have to figure that out, that's your job. And you give us one fixed rate. So they really kind of hedge their own bet, but that's on them. Okay. And so if you use less, if you all go shop at one point in time and we literally have zero power consumption default service, no harm, no foul. It's there for you in case any reason you have to come back. It'll instantly ramp up for you. Otherwise, again, no harm, no foul, you're there. And no loss to the company. We don't make money off of default service. It's a pure pass-through. We don't make a penny off of it. So again, it doesn't hurt anything or grid reliability or anything like that.
Okay, that it does sound like that your ability to change and get approval for changes in the default service is a fairly arduous and time-consuming process. Is that safe to say?
It is. It's probably 6 months of planning and 9 months to a year of litigation.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess. Well, let me. One other thing I really wanted to echo from what Barbara briefed, which is probably going to be in the top 1 or 2 things we need to really work with you all is transportation charging. The number of ideas of how we can integrate electric vehicles into the grid and you know, ways of conveniently charging them and minimizing disruptions to people's you know, normal routines. I mean, it spans the globe. There's thousands of ideas out there, and it's very hard for us to wrap our head around what is the best approach when, you know, if you even look at EV market penetration estimates all over the map. I mean, our team is going to, Tony, our team is going to propose, like, here's our assumption for what EV penetration we think is going to be on these years. And those, you know, that's how we're marching forward. I mean, we really, you certainly have thought of this, and I don't, you know, I would assume PPL's role could be anywhere from very, very participatory or very outsourcing. I mean, do you all feel like you have a corporate strategy of what you want to do yet on the transportation side of things in general terms?
Sure. So I can take it, and Barb, if there's anything else you'd like to throw in. It's one of these areas, actually, I'm on those teams as well. We're trying to strategically develop that as we speak. So it's short term, and how we've taken the place, at least for the past few years as EVs have begun to grow, is an enabler. So we don't own right now any chargers other than a handful, honestly, on our own property, some of which is piloting and testing for ourselves. As Barb showed in the presentation, we're looking to change our fleet over. So we're learning, again, as much as anybody is. But we're also trying to learn not just how we can use them, but take that same information and say how our customers are going to use them, how are our different areas going to use them, how are they growing over different periods of time. So we haven't, I'll say, completed our strategy, in that it's evolving as we're going forward. And one of the big things you might, I'm sure, all aware of is there was some legislative proposals last year in 2020. There's definitely going to be new ones coming forward in 21 that could change some of the roles and dynamics that we're going to play. At a minimum, we're going to continue to enable and look for ways to help customers integrate those chargers, whether they be, small ones, honestly, at the house level, probably not that big of an impact. We don't have to really do much, if anything, versus when you get to medium businesses, large businesses, fleet conversions, if you have warehouses, that sort of thing, that it's a bigger grid impact. So we want to be the partner there, so we can make sure we're saying yes when you come to us and you want to hook these up, and here's how to do it, here's what the time is going to be, here's what the cost is going to be, so that again, we're that partner there, and that we're just helping to flip the switches that they're coming on.
Thanks, Jim. That makes pretty good sense. I will just sort of, like, one area I'm personally kind of nervous about is, we have a real mix of single family and row houses and multifamily houses, which I would say of all three of those, in my mind, I think the row houses challenge is the most pernicious, because I can vision kind of logical ways of dealing with single family and multifamily housing, but from houses that are snug up to each other in very narrow streets. That's a pretty common imprint in our community, and we really have to be wise in how we accommodate market penetration in those areas. I think personally, Carla can disagree with me. She probably will. She often does, rightfully so. But I mean, that would be, that's going to be an area where, wow, we really got to figure that out. I think, is it safe to say that, you see the EV charging world as a way of balancing the grid and actually sort of, when you look at demand response, that, you see a potential of, perhaps fleets of EVs returning generation back on the source when needed, those sorts of things. Is that safe to say that's going to be part of your grid balancing strategy?
Yes, it has to be. So I'd say really EVs are just mobile batteries. And so they take from the grid when they need to charge, and they can give back to the grid when they're no longer needing to go somewhere. How that actually works, when that actually works, is one of these new innovative areas we're trying to learn. Some other states are doing things. California is, obviously the really big one. Seattle and Washington's another one where we're trying to understand. They might be a few years ahead of us, more from the perspective of more penetration. So it's one thing when there's a handful of EVs. It's another thing when you have thousands of EVs all at the same time. That's what we're trying to really learn from some of our peers, but it absolutely has to be part of our strategy.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to hear that. And Tom, just so you know, from some of the pilot studies that I've read, sort of experimenting on how this model would work with, the interchange of large fleets. A lot of school districts have looked at their busing fleets and done use that as sort of a test bed for how that would work. So, that's not, it would be, something that I think, as we move forward, that I would be surprised if 10 or 15 years from now we're not looking at school buses being your typical diesel internal combustion engines, but those are large fleets that tend to be available when power is needed most, right?
Right.
So those are the types of innovative sort of ideas I'd like us to keep thinking about. Is there a chunk of generation that PPL would see as valuable that works with different types of service generators, and school districts are one of those that I've seen working in that capacity. So Tony Underwood is our Pathways and Analytics team lead. his team is probably the most, maybe in parallel with Sarah's community engagement team, is most activated, I would say, right now, because his team is responsible for the kind of the high level strategies, the pathway strategies, without getting into the gory details that Mohammed's group will do. But in that sense, I kind of wanted to let Tony have a shot at picking your brains, because I think his team is working in this field pretty heavily right now.
Sure. I think for now, the one question I have is that, what we've been doing is we've been looking to, the 2018 Pennsylvania Climate Action Plan and some of the targets laid out, and primarily really three of the 15 actions proposed in the Pennsylvania Climate Action Plan account for something like 81% actually of the emissions reductions out to 2050. And two of them we've already been talking about today, right? One of them is increased the tier 1 renewable targets in the AEPS up to 50% tier 1 by 2050. And the other one is promotion of electric vehicles. The third, which is kind of less exciting but important, is keeping a nuclear on the grid, right? We're expecting actually a nuclear to begin falling off the grid after another decade, which is why in our baseline scenario in our greenhouse gas inventory, we actually see a slight increase, kind of tick up in the carbon intensity of the grid in the kind of second half of our time horizon. So just those three strategies alone are pretty important. So we're trying to use those to say, what actions can we as a borough take that would be consistent with those most impactful actions we expect the state to take, and the actions that would be most impacted by any federal action. And so I guess it's kind of the one thing a question I'd have for PPL, I think at this point, would simply be, what does a very rapidly increasing AEPS targets mean for you as a distributor in a kind of deregulated wholesale state like we are? And I just don't know enough about the energy markets in this way. So you mentioned that in your kind of default plan, that's one of those things you have to pay attention to, right? You have to be meeting the AEPS targets. But is that on you in terms of who you're buying it from, or is that on the suppliers to change their sourcing of fuels?
So it's a bit of both. I'd say just for the default service, it's how the rules themselves are shaping up. So take solar, for instance. There's a closing of the borders in Pennsylvania. I had to make sure my suppliers were complying with this, with what they were giving to me. So it's the same thing. I'm putting the onus on them that they have to hit these targets, or actually my current default plan, it's me making sure I'm buying enough credits to meet these targets. So the short-term target with each of these increases over the next 20 or 30 years as we're ramping them up, it's making sure there's enough credits out there, that there's not a thing called force majeure, that I'm trying to buy them, but they're not there and it's so expensive that it's not really prudent for me to spend that money. So that's maybe a microcosm, that's default service. The bigger thing I'd say impactful to PPL is making sure that in our service territory, throughout the entire territory, that where these new assets are going in, that we have the infrastructure to support them. So it's making sure we're expanding our transmission system and distribution system so it can flow to the grid, so that customers and consumers can access it. It can access the market. It can do what it needs to do. And I'd say that's the bigger question, because in most of the cases, when you have such a ramp up, you're going to get a significant number of average people, average customers, putting them on their house. But really the bang for your buck is going to be the solar farms, the wind farms, the bigger industrial complexes that can mass produce this clean power. And that's really the bigger constraint longer term, is just that we have the infrastructure there for it. And that's what we're actually trying to plan for now, is what's the future look like? Where do we see this going in? And even in specific parts of our territory, from the north to the south, the closer you get to the Maryland border, the higher penetration of solar, because there's more sun. So it's, taking that sort of dynamic understanding, even out in Harrisburg, it's really Harrisburg and Lancaster regions for us, those are the big areas that we're seeing this penetration. So it's making sure we have the infrastructure for it.
That's helpful. Thanks.
Yeah, when I heard Tony's question, you know, I was hearing decarbonization of the electric grid by 2035. You know, how would PPL respond to that? However that actually flows, you know, however that requirement flows down, I don't know, but like, you know, what keeps Jim up at night knowing if he had a requirement to actually try to meet a 2035 carbon neutral electricity requirement. I don't know if you even know the answer to that, but that's going to be very challenging, I think, maybe more so than in putting wires in the ground, just balancing the grid, you know, balancing the grid overall is getting harder as renewable penetration goes up. And I'm very, you know, I do appreciate the challenge that you know, it's great that we have a more distributed energy resources and zero carbon resources going onto the grid, but it is you know, it is a real challenge to integrate that, and I want, you know, we recognize that, and you know, to the degree that we can make you know, smart choices that accommodate your needs, we just need to know about them. I did want to, you know, we have a partnership kind of building with our sister city in Carlisle, England, and they're actually working on their climate action plan. They're a little further along than we are, but they're doing that. But one of the things that struck me as a key part of meeting their objectives, which are actually a little bit more ambitious than ours, is they're really relying a lot on behavioral changes. You know, personally, I think one area where I've just seen kind of, I think without too much argument, is the inability for utility companies to use technology, especially like smartphones and smart devices, to do like dynamic sort of demand response sorts of things. I'd be curious to know. I don't, you know, some utilities, especially really large ones, have their own behavioral departments. Can you speak a little bit toward how PPL as a retail provider, you know, if you have ideas that are already embedded in terms of how to integrate technology with behavioral changes? Because I think that's going to be a really important part, especially reaching our near-term goals.
Yeah, so that's one we're trying to develop. Actually, we're working our customer service group, so we don't have whole teams dedicated to it, but our customer service team themselves, who interact with everyone that interacts with us, they're the ones that are really trying to take those statistics, the understanding of the customer, how they're using power, the questions and concerns that they have, and build a model to that. How we're going to, I'll say, influence customers to make certain choices. Some of that, it just honestly comes up with plain education. So it's getting a clear, concise message to specific groups. So again, Barb, you know, you touched a lot on the low-income customer programs, you know, at-risk customer groups. They have different wants and needs than, you know, middle income groups versus commercial industrial customers. And so that's where we're starting to break certain groups apart, in that we want to make sure we're meeting their expectations. And we also kind of see that as the influence point. So what are their touch points with us, and how do we communicate that back out? Now, how does that translate to your objectives with clean energy? We're still figuring that out. So I don't have an answer and say, we have this model and we're pushing it out there, because I also say that it's going to change tomorrow. So it's one of those things I'm constantly trying to play catch up with. Where's it going? And what do all of you want? Meaning, your groups, Carlisle and other customers.
correct me if I'm wrong, but would you say it'd be safe to say that PPL is probably more likely to partner with a third-party provider who does this sort of thing rather than creating it in-house?
For some things, so for energy efficiency, so that's a big one for Act 129, which is energy efficiency and conservation standard in Pennsylvania. We do a hybrid approach. So we do contract out, I'll say more of like the boots on the ground sort of thing, getting out to businesses, out to local communities, just for pure manpower, if nothing else, but also some levels of expertise in how to roll energy efficiency programs out or replace appliances, things like that. When it comes to, I'll say, customer communications and organization, even rates, that is more likely in the short term to be within our company as opposed to outsourcing it. Now, we might seek some expert opinions on how to approach certain topics, but from a strategic standpoint, we're going to develop the program, and then we're going to also include some experts in very specific areas like we've done with our energy efficiency program and say, we want to know how to roll out this type of a program. We want to know how to get out to businesses in, say, the industrial sector who have very unique and different needs than a residential community.
Well, I would, I will I will speak for the wider community in saying I would love for you to reach out to Carlisle as an area where you're looking to get some of that information and maybe doing pilot studies, because we want to be partners to educate and to sort of do proof of concept for some of these ideas, and sometimes that's hard to find. And this is the group you want to talk to if you want to find a fairly significant, a sample size that would be of significance to the PUC. You can probably find it with your partners on this group, and we could do the legwork to make that happen. But I do understand the timelines it takes to prove new technologies, and we're gonna work with you to do that. I want to give maybe for the next a few minutes, any like immediate questions for Barbara or Jim before we turn it over to the team leads for their updates?
I'll go, Joel. Can you all hear me?
Yeah, that's a lot better. Yeah, it's good to hear your voice.
Well, you're being very kind, Joel, but that's fine. So I will just a quick practical question for you, because I know we're running short on time. Community solar, the bill is sitting in the legislature. It's coming. It may be probably. Really simple question. Have you hosted projects yet? Have you gone through that process of figuring out how to deal with the accounting and the credits and all that legal and economic stuff? And more importantly, have you thought through, have you done site surveys where you might even want to propose to communities, we'd be willing to help you develop community solar projects because you've identified, ideal interconnection points where there's lower cost, or, I think the solar resource is pretty uniform. But I'm just curious where you feel you're at on community solar, because I think to the extent that our community may want to be, a leader in that, take advantage, we would want to capitalize on a plan you have as opposed to push you in a direction you're not already going.
On community solar, certainly support the concept and would be happy to work with you. We prefer to work in advance so that we're brought in up front as opposed at the last minute, because that does happen. Okay, well, here's our project, connect us, but we, on the bills that have been moving in the Pennsylvania House and the Senate, we just don't support those that have the net metering provision.
I fully understand that, and actually, I'm agnostic as to the form and how the numbers are. I respect that totally. But Barbara, I'm very happy to hear the way you describe that, because I've seen in other states. I study this from my academic stuff, that the communities and the developers get way out ahead of the utilities, and that causes a lot of headaches. And I'm with you 100% on that. I'm wondering, even as a utility, if you've thought of going so far as to collaborating even in the site selection, in the scaling, and the I would love to think if you had a map of where you could see projects fitting, I'm talking a grid map. That'd be a very helpful thing, because we could then promote to our community ideal scenarios as opposed to trying to bring something to you that isn't compatible with your own plans. So I just want to park that now. It's a conversation we would love to have. So I very much appreciate your approach. A collaborative approach makes the most sense, I think, for everybody.
Jim, you have anything to add?
No, I'd just say, to that point with the collaboration, and actually it links to our DERM system, that distributed energy resource system. That's actually what it's there for. So it can help understand where constraints are, as well as new generation that's coming on, localized generation, so that we can give real rapid kind of turnaround. And it actually builds to some of these concepts depending on how big you get. So the bigger you get, there's certain thresholds where now you're considered like a power plant in the grid, which is kind of a different thing. But if you stay under certain thresholds, how's it going to impact the grid? We can give you real time or very quickly kind of information back on what reinforcements are needed, how fast can it go, and what can we do? Are there different options and opportunities for you? Maybe you go down the street a mile, there's a better place for you to interconnect, things like that. Are we kind of doing a holistic site study right now of our entire territory to say where could these things go? Honestly, no. But we're not doing that yet, because I'm also not completely sure where things are going to go with the rules and requirements and that sort of thing. So, I also don't want to get ahead of myself and then kind of spin our wheels and spend money that ends up just being a burn, as opposed to being really kind of driving the technology forward. So I'd say we're there, and we have the system that's built for this, and we actually have a portal system that when you have a project that you're interested in, you can fill out online forms, submit it. And I think we're up to like 85% of all projects that are submitted to us through this portal are approved in 24 hours. The ones that are larger, we're talking megawatts big, they might take like a site study. So we can't get them done in a day because I need the engineer to go do the detailed study on it. But even those are turned around pretty quick. So we're building the framework to kind of get
that's awesome. And I'll just say, we'll have that conversation at some point, because I lead our sort of projects conversation, so we're thinking about the where and the how kind of part of it. So that's really great. I mean, if there's an ideal scenario where we've got a community that's willing to host the project, that's willing to take the offtake, and also maybe provide some sort of grid service that makes things better on your end, that's a win-win. One last question for you. Virtual power plants, super exotic idea, but let me just ask a very basic question. Do you have any examples yet, at least in this part of your service area, where people have aggregated, 10, 20, however many homes, maybe it's an industrial site, and have sort of contracted with you on that aggregated basis? I know selling aggregated into the wholesale market's a whole separate thing. I'm just talking about directly to PPL. Is that a thing that you're doing yet?
It's not. The only close link we have to that is like virtual net metering. So the concept that you have, solar panels on a barn out back on a different meter, but you're within a certain radius, that's been in the rules for the net metering regs for 10 or 15 years now. But for your concept that a number of individual, say, net metered homes or buildings linking together, that's basically a kind of a form of community solar that wouldn't be approved by the commission yet. So we don't have any rules because we're not really sure how to build them yet.
All right. That was very helpful. Thank you. Those are my questions, Joel. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks everyone. Let's go ahead around the team leads updates. So Sarah, floor is yours. Can you update us where your team is right now?
Yeah, sure. So the community engagement team just met for the first time for 2021, at least, our first meeting in 2021 yesterday. So we talked quite a bit about our survey that is in draft form. It's about 21 questions, and we're working on editing that down and making it shorter. And basically, we're just trying to get a condensed version, maybe not condensed, but just an edited version of this survey. Not everything that we want to ask, I think, is perhaps going to make it into this survey, just in terms of keeping it short and not making the length of the survey itself become a barrier to people taking the survey. But hopefully the survey group will be meeting. So survey group will be meeting on Monday, January 11th, I believe, or on the 12th. We have two groups. They're both meeting on the 11th and 12th. So the survey group will be meeting, I believe, Monday. And then hopefully after that meeting, we should have a draft survey that we're ready to hopefully send around to the other team leads for some feedback, and to you, Joel, as well, and the rest of the executive committee. And then the next question will be getting that on SurveyMonkey perhaps to distribute it, or just the general question of how to distribute it. So we've had a few conversations about that. And hopefully I'll be following up with Susan Armstrong and Stephanie Taylor and getting some advice and insight from them as well. But we're really excited. It's really moving along. And then the same thing with the stakeholder mapping as well. Of course, the goal is to work with umbrellas of organizations if we can. So reaching out to, for example, the Chamber of Commerce, reaching out to even small business groups like the Pomfret Street Group or the Downtown Carlisle Association, also the Interfaith Religious Council. So we're working on that, trying to find connections, and then also try to think about ways that are ways that we can partner with each of these different maybe groups of either organizations, businesses, just stakeholders in general. And then our next meeting will probably be the week of January 19th. We don't have an exact date set for that yet, but that's what we're working on. Yeah.
Thanks, Sarah. And I'll just sort of plant the seed in your head, over the next few weeks as you're doing that. I would encourage you to reach out to Mohammed, just to start thinking, just to start, spitballing ways that you might want to integrate, community priorities with the economic costs and benefits that will be working, in parallel with the things that Mohammed and his team will be working on. So, which is a very subjective thing to evaluate the importance of prioritizing the, improving energy efficiency in low-income areas, is both a social and an economic challenge. But I do look to you two to kind of figure out how you weigh those against each other and balance those things. So just something to keep in your mind as you're collecting the data and understanding what our community wants out of our plan. So thank you for that update. Great. Look forward to seeing the results. I can't wait for the results.
Thanks. Yeah, we're excited too. Thank you.
Sarah, not to volunteer Barb and Jim for something else, but in particular the survey or any components of what you're working on right now, do you think it might be helpful to get a little bit of feedback from the utilities in any way?
It could be helpful just in terms of specifically maybe. It kind of depends on which way the survey gets edited. So we're kind of in this spot right now where there's certain questions that are asking, like, what actions would you personally take? Are you willing to do perhaps X, Y, Z? And we might break this survey down and do like the first one more general, right? So what are people's values in relation to, like, are you willing to take personal steps broadly, or are you willing to support broadly regulations, policies, a different variety, a mixture of solutions to climate change. But I do think it would be helpful to have some insight and feedback, and I would definitely welcome that, or I would also welcome you to come and meet with our group if you would like. That would be great.
Yeah, I'd be happy to take a look at your survey.
Yeah,
no, that'd be excellent. And I was going to ask too, and obviously I don't want to hold this meeting up, but Joel asked the question that I wanted to ask about costs, not exactly, but I do think that'll be a concern. We've already seen a little bit of concern, just kind of around the subject of the climate action plan. And I think this partnership with you could really help to maybe assuage some of those fears of people being really concerned, especially right now with the economic crisis and the unfortunate situation people are in, perhaps because of the economic situation. I think people are really just very worried about energy prices increasing, which I'm sure you're hearing on your end too. So it'll be interesting to maybe hear a little bit more about that in the context of our group as well.
Sure, happy to provide some input.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. So yeah, Tony, evening.
Hi, everyone. I'll give you just a brief update. We met just before the holidays on the Pathways and Analytics team. We are meeting again at the end of next week. In the interim, what me and Neil Leary primarily have been working on is developing some pathways in this tool we're using, ClearPath from ICLEI, that are, as I suggested earlier, kind of consistent with some of the goals laid out in the Pennsylvania Climate Action Plan, in order for us to get a sense of the types of programs we could develop as a municipality to support those types of initiatives. Sorry, one of my kids is trying to break my door down at the moment. He and the and I listed them earlier, right? So, and they really focused on two components of this. Two of the biggest sources of emissions, as we know from our inventory in the borough, are emissions from transportation and emissions from the residential and commercial energy, and the biggest piece of which there is electricity. And so what we're focused on there is what are some sort of reasonable targets to, in terms of, say, emissions per kilowatt hour in residential and in commercial, and then what are some realistic targets for electric vehicle penetration over the next several decades? You kind of motivating that by the Pennsylvania Climate Action Plan. And so, what we went ahead and did was we modeled if we met the goals laid out in the Pennsylvania Climate Action Plan, how far would that get us, right, in the borough, right? And so we developed a modeling scenario that just implemented those three strategies: increase the AEPS targets as projected out to 2050, maintain nuclear on the grid at its current levels, and increase and do a fairly aggressive promotion of electric vehicles. This is actually one of the things that's left the most vague in the Pennsylvania Climate Action Plan. But what we looked at was getting to, say, 90% of new sales by 2050. That'll get us to about 87% of the light duty vehicle fleet by 2050 in terms of electric vehicles. The ones focused on the electricity grid is basically a 4% reduction in emissions per year per kilowatt hour out to 2050. We just modeled what that would get us. And what we found out, of course, is that only gets us about halfway to our 2050 target of 80% below 2005 levels. It gets us to about 40% below 2005 levels by 2050. And so that's where we're at right now to get a sense of how aggressive of actions do we need to take to get to our 2050 targets. And are those consistent with the actions we can expect from the state if taking its climate action plan seriously? And how could we as a borough support those actions? And so we tried to focus on the ones in particular, things like solar, things that we might have a little bit more control over, and electric vehicles, and we're starting there. So we're hoping over the next several weeks to begin doing some additional modeling and including separate, basically separate strategies that get us to these higher level pathways we've laid out thus far. So that's where we're at in our process, and what we hope to be able to do is begin reaching out to the other teams here soon with some of these numbers that we have preliminarily so far.
Okay, thanks. Do you have any plans about when you might have some options to sort of present and maybe so we can vote on them? Are we going to have that level of fidelity by you think February or March?
Yeah, well, I think it depends. We could certainly have broad pathways by over the next 2 months. I think the question becomes is how detailed do we want those pathways to be in terms of the strategies that achieve them, right? Because
I think
what allow us to do.
Yeah, you can feel a little bit more comfortable with having less fidelity. maybe as we move forward, and just for Jim and Mary, just so you all know, so our requirements echo yours. Actually, yours are technically a little bit more aggressive since you have a 2010 versus a 2005 was actually a higher peak level than 2010. So your 80% is a little bit more aggressive than our 80%. But I've also challenged our team to look at a 2050 carbon neutral outcome, which is more aggressive than either of those, which personally, I think before we adjourn this commission, that will actually be, I would not be surprised if that actually is our new standard, because our ordinance requires us to meet or exceed the most current international, national, or state requirements. So I don't think we're long before we're going to be close to that 2050 neutral target. Just so you know how the numbers are crunching. They're pretty well aligned to your goals already, but I think they're gonna start getting more aggressive, not less. So yeah, hopefully that's helpful, Tony. If you want to float some, hey, you think these are detailed enough to me or whoever else, I'll be happy to take a look at them and say, hey, let's run with these, and then if we have some follow-up, we can put you back into the shop, but we can get the other teams engaged and rolling sooner the better. I would like to actually have some sort of, at least a couple of pathways to dig into maybe by February. So I'm really glad UGI wasn't here tonight. We would have stamped them out yeah. So this actually worked out. I'm really thrilled that we had PPL joining us. There's a lot of questions that we got answered tonight, which is great. All right, thanks, Tony. Carla, over to you.
Mine'll be pretty short. We did not meet in December, got away from us a little bit, but we are meeting next Thursday and going over some of the stuff that I presented at the December 3rd meeting, just to get a handle on what the priorities are of the committee. The other thing is too that we want to take a look at the Chester ordinance that talks about zoning ordinances as they relate to environmental justice concerns and prohibiting emission increases and stuff from particular types of facilities. So I thought that would be interesting too.
Okay, that sounds good. I was just curious, maybe Sean, you've talked about this, perhaps. I just wanted to know, did you feel compelled to do any sort of follow-up to the draft ordinances that we got from Widener at this point, to do any sort of, basic deliberation on sort of what direction we might want to take those ordinances in the next few months, or was that something you thought might be more appropriate to sort of shelve until we're done with this process?
Joel, was that a question to me or Carla?
Well, I guess in the context that sort of Carla has been the one interacting with Widener and sort of understands how the connections of these ordinances are with our greenhouse gas reduction. I would expect she would expect she would sort of be leading that collaboration with the borough up until the time that we disband, but I just didn't want to I wanted to make sure that nobody else was expecting somebody to act on those, or if that had been discussed yet basically on those two draft ordinances.
But well, we haven't discussed, or I haven't discussed it yet with Carla or anybody on the team. But I imagine how we'll approach those as we're preparing recommendations. Those are going to, of course, be up for consideration and decide at that stage what we're going to put into the package, right?
Right. One reason, so they were actually.
Yeah, I'm just going to say one reason I bring it up is just the fact that we have our utility partners who are certainly in terms of implementation, particularly I think in terms of the EV infrastructure, to a certain degree, the parking changes. It just, it might be convenient since we already sort of have a deliberative body here to work, should we try to integrate that now as opposed to later? That was really what prompted my question.
Sure.
So just so PPL knows, we've been working with Widener Law School, who is helping us update our ordinances to help us meet our targets. As you might imagine, a lot of these ordinances are quite outdated and certainly don't reflect changing technology, not to mention our environmental goals. So if the time allows us to, I would like Carla and Sean and the folks on the zoning team, to the extent possible, to at least get to work with our utility providers to see if they have some thoughts that might help shape whenever we get around to actually debating those, in the wider community. Thank you, Carla. And Mohammed, you're up.
Yeah, I'll keep ours brief as well. We haven't met yet this year. And what we agreed upon at our last meeting, some of us in person and some of the group that I spoke to afterwards, Tamala was nice enough to join us in person last time, was we're sort of continuing on that informal survey that we talked about, nothing near the detail or outreach you're talking about, Sarah, just in trying to talk to folks we know in the community, either companies or other who have been making purposeful choices with a climate impact in mind, just to get a sense of what activity there already is, what projects there already are. So we'll try and collate that. Really, it's just taking the temperatures, not trying to do anything sort of, really trying to get a sense of how much money's been spent. It's really just trying to get a sense of the level of activity. And so we'll continue that. I think, Joel, you hinted at before, and it's true, sir. I think the moment that you start getting responses from your surveys, and you may even want to include a question in the survey if it's not too late, of have you, invested in, let's say a change in either your business infrastructure, or your business process, your home consumption habits. Have you actually spent money, so to speak, with an intended climate outcome, and did you find it to actually, be worthwhile? I think once we have that helpful starting point that we talked about last time of knowing those in our community who are already moving, who are already putting their own time and money and work towards this goal. And that gives us a nice entry point for when we do start talking about project options, maybe some models and maybe some lessons learned to help guide that process, and hopefully get to the point that you talked about, Joel, of being able to credibly say, we think we have a feel for what the community deems to be valuable and to be a worthwhile cost, in addition to the economic savings, a worthwhile social cost for that analysis that we'll be running.
Great, Mohammed, thank you for that. And so other committee members and stakeholders, just want to leave it, Tamala or Tom or Susan. Anything for the group? Or Owen, sorry. Oh, I see. Almost missed Owen.
Mm-hmm. The only thing I would mention is I've actually thought about that community solar. We looked at that, oh golly, a few years back, but the district there is one site that I think that it's 20 acres, I believe, that would be a great location for a solar farm, and it's right next to the grid. So, it faces the right way. And so as you're looking at that would be a spot that we could take a look at.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, and Mary and Jim, just so you know, Cumberland County government is about 11 months behind us in their development of a climate action plan, which is to say that the potential geographic footprint that we have to work with may be expanding outside our tiny borough here. So when we're talking about community solar, we're going to have partners adjacent to us who we can work with, and let's not forget warehouses. I personally think there is tremendous synergy as long haul shipping is becoming electrified to look at putting more solar on warehouse tops. But that's a conversation for another day. But we have those just so you know, we have commitment, we have interest from Cumberland County to work with them on their climate goals. So this is an expanding, not a contracting group. Anyone else have anything for us this evening before we wrap things up? Yeah, Tamala, please go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Just quickly, and in all your planning, and I'm sure you guys are very aware, to keep in mind and be mindful of having your actions reflective of the social and environmental justice, and also of community. Is what you're going to be doing going to be creating a sense of community, or is it going to be creating a sense of more separation within the community? And then also, is what you're implementing going to help our air and water quality? And just to put on your radar, plastics are of big concern with residents, and that's 8% of fossil fuel use and growing, and that is a direct contributor to poor air and water pollution. That's all.
Yeah, thanks, Tamala, for that important reminder. And I know, I've challenged Mohammed to look at co-benefits. A lot of what you're talking about are co-benefits, and that has to be part of our rationale for our cost benefit. It's not just about greenhouse gases here. A lot of these more direct health benefits are going to come from other types of reductions in emissions, particularly on transportation. And I also kind of heard one other comment that is a little bit of a deficiency in our plan right now is we're not really looking at scope. There's this thing called Scope 3 emissions, which basically is a fancy way of saying you've accommodated not just your direct emissions, but what the emission footprints were of the things you use. So one interesting difference between what UK is doing and what we're doing is they're actually looking at Scope 3 emissions. We're not even doing that right now, which I will say is actually kind of difficult to do. And I'm happy with the direction we're going, but I think the next level of complexity in the out years will be to start looking at things a little bit more, as Tamala sort of conveyed, soup to nuts. We're even though we're doing some really great modeling and estimations, we're actually not going all the way to ground, right? Which gets a little bit more. That's for another day. But important to keep in mind in our decisions, even if we're not capturing them quantitatively. I think we can all make pretty good assessments about where we procure our products and services and keep that reflected. I don't know if Susan or Owen, do you have anything to take us out this evening?
I don't. I'll pass it over to Owen. Owen, you have anything?
No, I don't have anything. Thanks.
Yeah, my Wizards are coming after your Celtics tomorrow night, by the way. You've been warned. Well, Mary and Jim, if I'm going to have a few questions. I'm not a few. I'm going to have a ton of questions, but I want you to be on it. If we're bombarding you, I've basically told my team leads they have free access to you all, and I really want to reiterate our appreciation for you being part of this group. You're a critical part. We're not going to meet our targets without you. It's absolutely essential that we work together, and I believe we can. The information tonight was spot on. It really cleared up some things with me, but you've prompted a dozen other questions. So do appreciate. I think the conversations we have are actually exactly the ones we need to be having. So if nobody has anything else, we will have UGI up doing something similar next February, among other things. But throw me a request if you need some time, team leads to brief something, and we'll get that on the agenda. If there's nothing else, everyone have a nice evening. The meeting's adjourned. Good night, everyone.